Hi, I'm Bonigala, brand strategist. Every startup needs a chief branding officer. Okay, that's a bit of a bold statement. When I say every startup, I really mean every startup. Um, if you're just the founder of the startup or a business, and you're just a single person in the business, then trying to get a chief branding officer may be slightly beyond the scope of your business, right? Because it costs a lot of money. But the concept of the chief branding officer is very important. In fact, you would need to wear the hat of the chief branding officer. Now, a chief branding officer, there's many definitions out there, many kind of lists of criteria for what makes a chief branding officer. And there's no hard and fast rule, right? It's not set in stone. Basically, a chief branding officer is nothing but an evangelist for the brand, right? For the business. And it starts with the strategic thought process. It then translates into messaging. It's about studying the effects of the messaging, the impact it has on the marketing, and of course, the subsequent impact on sales and revenue. So, a chief branding officer's main job is to look at the business from the perspective of messaging. Any piece, any kind of copy, it could be on the website, it could be on social media channels, it could be, of course, the content that is put out there. It could be the sales copy, it could be customer service, emails, proposal, anything that, any touch point in your business, in your brand, in your startup, where a third party interacts with your brand. And that's, of course, your target audience. And it could also be your other vendors. It could be potential partners. It could be potential co-founders, anyone who interacts with your brand. The message that is being broadcasted, that has to be controlled, that has to be cultivated, that has to be tweaked and nurtured, is done by the chief branding officer. And the reason, okay, you might say, Mash, you know what? Yeah, I do that. I have to do that for my business, and I've been doing it for a long time. Why do I have to label this as a chief branding officer, or why would I need a chief branding officer? We already have our marketing, guys. They are playing the role of the chief branding officer. That's okay. I'm not advocating that you need to go right now and hire a chief branding officer right now. But understanding the concept of the chief branding officer and what it means, the importance of the chief branding officer, of that title, of that concept, of that idea, is going to make a big difference in your business. If you're just by yourself and you're the founder of your startup or your business, and when you wear the hat of the chief branding officer, the way you think about your brand will be different from when you are, let's say, the CEO, or when you are the employee, when you're, creating the deliverables that come out of your company. It could be the product, it could be the service. When you're servicing your customers, the thought process, the mindset you have at that time would be different from when you're wearing the hat of the chief branding officer. So that makes all the difference, because when you consciously, with intention, put the hat of the chief branding officer, then you're signaling to yourself what needs to be done. What are the standards you're holding yourself to? And how critical and important it is for the success of your business, of your startup, of your brand. So, what are the things to look for, or what are the things to keep in mind when you are the chief branding officer? I speak from experience. I'm the chief branding officer on a number of different businesses, different startups. And I've been a chief branding officer for a long time. Initially, it was just thinking through the strategy. So brand strategy, positioning, that's all I was doing. And I thought that was what a chief branding officer was. But I evolved, and I every day is a learning process, even to this day, when I come up upon a challenge in a startup, and I need to tackle that challenge as the branding officer. I learn a few different things every day, every single day. So it's a learning process. But getting back to the question, what are the things to look for? What are the things to keep in mind as a chief branding officer? The first and foremost is that you are a brand evangelist for your brand, right? You are someone who's going to broadcast and rally around your brand, around the core message of your brand. Of course, this assumes that you've already created the core message and the messaging framework, and you already have the core essence of the brand nailed down. There's a brand persona, there's a tone, and all those things that I usually talk about in my videos. This assumes that you all have those all lined up and nailed down. Taking that forward, taking that into the real world is your job as the chief branding officer. That's one. The second is, of course, strategic thought process. As a chief branding officer, you are bridging the gap between your brand essence, your marketing, your sales, and of course, your revenue. So these four corners of the square you'll have to look at. You'll have to keep your eye on. So when a piece of messaging is being created for, let's say, a campaign, a summer campaign coming up, and you have a new line, new product, new version of your service, and you want to put it out there. When you think of it as a chief branding officer, you need to look at all four corners of the square and say, how does this message apply to, let's say, the sales process? If we're claiming this here, does it affect the sales process? Does it affect the marketing process? So on and so forth. And then you need to advise. Of course, if you have different teams for this, then as the chief branding officer, you are the liaison, right? You are the bridge between all these things and how the message should be and what changes should be made to, let's say, the marketing or the sales process to accommodate the message. The third important thing as the chief branding officer is really how you kind of create this bird's eye view of the entire business model and the revenue model. So, and you might say, well, hang on, Mash, isn't that the job of the CEO or the CTO or the COO? Yes, it could be the job of any one of these roles, but it's also the job of the chief branding officer. Yes, many of you might be thinking and shaking your head and saying, Mash, we don't need yet another title. That's why I'm saying this is not a title. This is a frame of mind. This is a philosophy. Being a chief branding officer is a frame of mind. It's a philosophy, right? So starting today, think of yourself as the chief branding officer of your brand when you need to be. Wear the hat, be intentional, learn about branding, learn about strategy, strategic thought process, learn about the different frameworks out there, learn about messaging and how messaging impacts the other operations within your business and so on. So when you have this kind of frame of mind, when you have this holistic thought process, which is what a chief branding officer needs to have, then you're going to see the results really, quickly. And it creates a big impact on your business. All right. So if you have not already subscribed to this channel, please do so right now. And if you have any questions or insights into this topic about chief branding officer, and if it's something new, if you haven't heard of it before, nice, ask me questions. Or if you already thought about this or tried it out and you haven't found much use of it, then let me know. Ask me a question too. You can reach me on Twitter at Bonigala or follow me on LinkedIn. And I post strategies, tips, and for founders and startups on LinkedIn. And you can also ask me questions there. All right. Till my next video, take care and prosper.